The first step I took across that Brooklyn gym floor felt like walking on crushed bottle glass. Cap tilted, gown heavy, a white rose burning cold against my chest. 2 weeks since a drunk driver on Flatbush turned my countdown to graduation into a countdown to grief. Today, I walk anyway, carrying her. New York don't stop for nobody. Sirens stitched through Atlantic Avenue. The B-41 coughed past our brownstone. From the bodega downstairs came bacon, egg, and cheese steam sweet enough to make a man forget his pain for a minute. Ma stood at the kitchen table, pressing my gown with a travel iron, whispering, "No wrinkles in these pictures, baby." She sounded steady, but her hand shook like a loose train window. I slid 2 things into my inner pocket, the fresh white rose and Layla's last drawing, a purple crayon Brooklyn bridge under spray-painted gold stars. The folds made soft scars across the paper. Uncle Ray leaned in the doorway sipping corner coffee and said, "Proud of you, kid, dead serious." Pride felt like a coat that didn't quite fit, but I wore it for them. On the stoop, Manny waved from behind the lotto glass. "Yo, D, make that diploma count." He tossed me a mini honey bun for luck. The block smelled like wet brick and summer trash awaiting pickup, like heat deciding if it wanted to fight. At Linden Boulevard, the crosswalk shrine still glowed, even in daylight. Wax mounds, rain-soggy teddy bears, a pink balloon with yesterday's breath. The gym was all floor wax, scuffed lines, and squealing mics. Balloons bumped the backboard. My eyes kept sliding to the front row, where they draped her sparkly Big Bro's #1 tan over an empty chair. The sight could split a rib. Principal Morales, all Bronx gravel made gentle, asked, "You good to walk?" "Good enough," I said, which wasn't true, but had to be. The band hacked through pomp and circumstance. Families leaned over railings with phones like lighthouses. I spotted Ma in the second row, scarf sharp, tissue ready, chin high like she was auditioning for strength. When my name hit the speakers, I felt my heel do our secret 1-2 slide. I touched the rose, then the folded bridge. The announcer added, voice catching, and in loving memory of his little sister, Layla Rivera. A hush, then applause like warm rain. I took the diploma with both hands and lifted it a breath toward the rafters in case she was up there between banners, clacking beads, telling angels, "That's my brother, stop playing." I didn't cry. The tears stood in formation, waiting for orders. After the recession, the hallway tasted like cafeteria pizza and perfume. Dante hugged me and said, "You did right, bro." I nodded because words were expensive and I'd already spent too many. Ma asked, "Seminary?" We went. New York buzzed around us like a beehive, pretending not to notice or smoke. At Greenwood, the grass wore dew like jewelry. Pastor Denise met us by the gate. "No microphone today. God's ears work fine." We made a half circle around the new earth. I knelt and set the rose on the mound and said her name. Just that. Like it was a door I still knew how to knock on. The breeze answered with the hush of leaves. For a second, the city quieted. No horns, no yelling from the park, nothing but my pulse and my humming, broken but on key. I remembered Layla clowning in our hallway mirror, telling me, "Throw that cap like a rocket, D. Don't be soft." I promised again I would. We left the rose, left the dirt, carried everything else home. Back at the brownstone, foil pans from church covered the counter. Neighbors drifted in and out with hugs and awkward jokes. Someone left a Mets pennant by the door because she liked the blue. I pressed my gown across the sofa arm, standard, at half-mast. In my room, I taped the bridge drawn above my desk with painter's tape, so gentle the wall could barely feel it. I stared until the gold dots blinked like real stars. When night fell, Brooklyn kept talking. The Q train rattled its teeth. A couple argued 3 stoops down. A fire hydrant hissed some way between joy and waste. I lay in the dark, hearing beads that weren't there. The house had an outline where her sound used to live. I asked God if he took trade-ins. "I take my shine," I whispered. "Just give back her laugh." No answer, but the radiator ticking like a slow clock. Toward midnight, I rose, ironed the crease Ma missed, and rehearsed my smile in the hallway mirror. It looked rented. I tried again, this time letting my mouth remember the way she cracked up when I faked the moonwalk on dusty wood. That one felt closer to mine. I tucked the speech draft into my back pocket and breathed in like I was about to dive. I wrote one more line before sleep. Grief is love with nowhere to go, so it paces the apartment until you open a window. I opened the window. Sirens braided with wind. Somewhere, a delivery truck sighed at a red light. It sounded like the city taking a tired breath it had owed us for weeks. Morning found me before the alarm, the room gray-blue and quiet. Ma had fallen asleep on the couch with the TV glow painting her face soft. I brewed her tea and left it steaming by her elbow, then sat at the table and copied the speech clean, ink steady, paper flat. If my voice shook later, at least my words would be dressed right. On the way back to school, I practiced under my breath, catching the rhythm of train wheels over track joints. For Layla, who taught me to dance before I could walk across any stage, I could hear her correcting my cadence. Slower, D, let 'em feel it. I slowed. People on the bus stared. I didn't care. The city had seen stranger. By the time I reached the gym again, the bleachers was already filling, a bright patchwork of church hats, Timberlands, suits, and summer dresses. The air tasted like nerves and hairspray. Principal Morales ran last-minute checks, tapping the mic, nodding to the band. I pressed my palm to my pocket, the rose, the bridge, like checking a heartbeat. When my row rose, the floor under my feet felt steadier than I expected. Maybe because every step held an echo. Her tiny sneakers on the apartment wood, the way her beads clicked when she ran to the door to meet me. Throw it like a rocket, D, she'd say, and I could see her bottom lip stuck out until I promised. I smiled, real this time, not the rented one. I crossed, took the diploma, and found Ma's eyes. She mouthed, "For two." I nodded. The applause rolled over me warm as July. Outside, the sun stood tall, reflecting off parked car hoods like mirrors sending signals. I held the diploma in both hands like a steering wheel and felt something shift, not the grief leaving, but settling into the passenger seat. On the bus ride home, a little boy in a Spider-Man tee asked if I was famous. I said, not yet. He asked what the flower was for. I told him for somebody I love. He nodded like he understood the whole dictionary. He said, my grandma got a flower on her fridge. Keeps her happy. I said, mine too. And maybe it was true now. Back at our block, the shrine's candles had melted into low stubs, but the balloon still knocked its knot against the pole like a heartbeat. I touched the plastic, felt the last of yesterday's breath press back. In our apartment, I slid the diploma under the bridge drawing and whispered, we made it. The room stayed quiet, but it felt like a good quiet, a held note instead of an empty stage. If you're still listening, don't go nowhere. We're about to rewind to the last ordinary day. Pink polish, candy bag, a green light that looked harmless. That's where the debt started. That's where New York said, pay up. That's where New York said, pay up. And hope listened.
2 weeks before graduation, Brooklyn woke up loud and ordinary, and I didn't know I was living my last regular morning. The sun bounced off brownstone windows, buses hissed, and somewhere a car alarm argued with a pigeon. I thought I was headed to rehearsal. Layla thought she was headed to buy pink polish. Neither of us knew the clock had a knife. Ma was at the stove, flipping plantains, steam fogging the kitchen window where somebody had taped a Met schedule. She wore her purple scarf, tied neat, and moved like a woman whose hands knew the dance before the drum. Eat, she said, sliding me two on a paper plate. And stop acting brand new. That diploma's not going to run away. Layla burst from the bathroom with a mouthful of foam and a playlist blasting from her little blue speaker. Yo, D, watch this, she mumbled around toothpaste, then hit a silly shimmy that knocked her beads together like tiny wind chimes. She wore her Big Bro's #1 fan tee over ripped jeans and had a sticker on her cheek shaped like the star. She spit in the sink, wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, and grinned. I'm fabulous. Uncle Ray leaned in the doorway, sipping corner coffee. City's a zoo, he warned, eyes on the window. Drivers don't see nobody smaller than a rent increase. Ma swatted the air. Don't curse the day. We ate quick at the cable, scarred with homework dents and board game scratches. Layla dangled a sneaker lace and asked, After school, can I walk to Manny's? I need polish for my graduation nails, pink with gold glitter, for the theme." Ma said no without looking up. Layla turned the pout up to 11. "Please, 2 blocks. I'll do both ways like a TikTok tutorial." I said, "I'll go after rehearsal," even though I didn't want to. Exams were done, but Coach wanted one more walkthrough of the cap toss. Ma weighed both faces and finally said, "Fine. Straight there, straight back. Text me a picture from outside the store. You hear me?" "Yes, ma'am," she sang, doing the 1-2 slide across the tile. On the stoop, Manny yelled from behind the lotto glass, "Attendance queen, honey bun for the champ." He handed Layla a free one, and me a nod like we shared a secret. The block was damp from last night's drizzle, trash trucks growling, a stroller wheel squeaking rhythm under somebody's breath. The city smelled like wet brick, hot coffee, and new trouble. We walked to school together, cutting past the beauty supply window with those mannequin heads staring like they knew gossip. At the corner, Layla stopped at the curb, pointed both ways like an air traffic controller, and said, "See? Safe." I bumped her shoulder. "Text Ma after school." "Aye, aye," she saluted. The day slid by in slow slices. Math review I didn't need, a guidance counselor speech about scholarships, cafeteria nuggets shaped like comets, Dante telling jokes that landed like pigeons, messy but brave. At lunch, I pulled the speech draft from my pocket and underlined the first line twice. For Layla. For Layla. For Layla. At 3:15, I headed for rehearsal. Coach barked orders. The band practiced the same 8 bars until it sounded like a parade lost under the Gowanus. My phone buzzed. "Ma. Chart's late. Can you scoop Layla?" I typed, "Coach got me trapped. 10 minutes. 3 dots. Then, "I'll get her. Go rehearse." Rain grumbled over the rooftops. The gym lights hummed. We practiced the lineup twice more. When Coach finally waved us off, I checked my phone. 2 missed calls from Ma. A voicemail I still can't delete. My thumb trembled. I pressed play. Her voice sounded like a door blown open by wind. "D. Kings County. Now." The floor slipped. The banners on the wall tilted. I ran. Outside, air like wet wool. I sprinted to the bus stop, lungs burning, heart syncopated with the crosswalk beeps. The driver saw my face and waved me on. The ride blurred, stoplights smearing, storefronts melting, raindrops racing each other down glass. I bargained with God like a man at a pawn shop. "Take my scholarship, my sneakers, my whole senior year. Leave me her laugh." Kings County smelled like bleach and burnt coffee. The automatic doors whooshed like an inhaler. I found Ma near the desk with her scarf crooked, eyes wide like siren light. "Hit and run," she said. 2 words, and the world cracked like ice under a skater. They rushed Layla past triage. I saw only a sneaker hanging by a lace, a plastic bag fallen open with candy spilling out like an offering. A nurse waved a palm at us. "Wait here." The doors closed, and the red restricted sign glowed like a bruise. Uncle Ray arrived, out of breath, rain on his lashes. Aunt T came with her church shawl, whispering scripture like stitches. Hours turned to water. A vending machine coffee cooled untouched. A toddler in Spider-Man pajamas cried. The Knicks lost on mute, again. Detective Harris showed up in a damp trench and asked questions shaped like nets. Color, plates, direction, speed. I gave him every syllable I owned. Black sedan, jersey tags, rear door dent maybe, eastbound, too fast, too loud. He wrote and said, "We'll pull every camera from Linden to church. We're not sleeping on this." Near midnight, Dr. Singh appeared like a lighthouse, scrubs tired, eyes gentle. He said, "We stopped the bleeding for now. She's critical but stable. She's fighting." Ma folded, then stood back up inside herself. The nurse let us in one by one. I went last. ICU was all beeps and hush. Layla lay small as a secret, hair fanned like punctuation marks, tape on her cheek where a sticker should have been. I spoke into the big quiet. "Yo, Shorty, it's me. I'm right here. Remember the moonwalk? Remember you said my elbows look dumb? You can roast me when you wake up." Her eyelids fluttered. Or maybe that was wishful thinking. Back in the chairs, the AC breathed like a tired animal. Ma dozed against Aunt T, fingers still gripping her purse strap. I stared at a stain on the ceiling tile shaped like the Brooklyn Bridge and took it as a sign, because hope will take any shape if you're starving. A volunteer brought turkey sandwiches. Nobody ate. At 4, the beeping hiccuped and a nurse jogged past. The room held its breath. Then it steadied. Dawn sneaked up, gray and tight. When visiting hours flipped, Moss said, "Home, shower, come back." We left our names on the clipboard like signatures on a treaty with the morning. On the bus, I pressed my forehead to the glass and watched Brooklyn yawn, gates lifting, steam rising, pigeons auditioning for crumbs. At Linden, the shrine looked newborn in soft light. Candles stood like soldiers who'd guarded all night. A pink balloon slept against the pole, tied to the day. I promised it, and the city, and the sky, I'm bringing her home. I didn't know how to keep that promise. I made it anyway. Outside, dawn thinned the clouds. I held hope like a ticket and kept walking. Toward home, praying.
Kings County at night felt like a city inside the city. Bleached air, buzzing lights, doors that breathed you in and out while time stopped checking the clock. We stepped through the whoosh of the ER, and the day we'd been living ended without telling us goodbye. The automatic doors slid shut behind us with a sound like a tired sigh. Rain still glittered on the floor mats. A security guard pointed toward the triage desk. Beyond that, double doors glowed with a red restricted sign like an angry eye. Ma's scarf had slid sideways. She didn't fix it. Her hands were fists around her purse straps as if she could wring good news out of leather. A nurse in purple scrubs took Ma's name, Layla's age, what happened, where it happened. Every answer felt like a bruise we had to press. "Hit and run," Ma said, voice thin. 9 years old, Linden and East 57th. Please, please. The nurse nodded, a quick professional kindness. "They're working on her. You can wait just there." Which meant sit with your fear like it pays rent. The waiting room was a collage of stories. Toddlers with fevers, an old man wheezing, a delivery driver holding his wrist, a woman praying over a teenager with a busted lip. The TV showed a Knicks replay on mute. A closed caption line misspelled somebody's name and never fixed it. I sat where I could see the red doors. Ma wouldn't sit. She paced in a rectangle that started to look like a prayer rug. Uncle Ray hustled in with rain on his lashes and a paper bag of cafeteria coffees that smelled like burnt hope. Aunt T followed 5 minutes later, shawl damp, breath short from the bus. She wrapped Ma in the shawl and began whispering scriptures Brooklyn style, soft but with backbone. "Yea, though I walk, we walkin', Lord, 10 toes down. Don't play with us tonight." I kept the broken pink nail polish bottle in my fist like evidence, red streaks dry and sticky on my palm. A big security guard noticed and handed me a napkin. "You straight, young blood?" he asked, the way New Yorkers say, "I see you," even when they can't fix it. I nodded. The napkin came away pink, like a careless sunset. Time turned elastic. A vending machine ate Uncle Ray's dollar. He smacked it twice and the bag of chips fell, like even the machines knew not to argue with grief tonight. A volunteer in a yellow vest offered turkey sandwiches we didn't touch. Somewhere a child laughed in their sleep, and it echoed through the plastic chairs like a dare to hope. Detective Harris arrived, damp and deliberate, trench coat folding around him like a night tide. He introduced himself without looking at his notes first, a small respect. He asked for everything: the angle of the sedan, speed, the color under the street lamp, the slice of shadow on the rear door. I told him black, jersey plates with a K or X, maybe both. Rear passenger door looked punched in, tail light smoky, exhaust loud enough to be petty. He wrote like a man who wanted his pen to count as a prayer. "We're pulling cams from Linden to church," he said. "MTA, DOT, storefronts. We'll canvass in the morning, but we already started." Ma stared past him at the red doors. "Find him," she said. Not loud, but it landed heavy. The detective nodded once. "Yes, ma'am." He meant it, and even if meaning it wasn't enough, it held me together for 2 minutes. Around midnight, the doors cracked open and a nurse called our name. We stood up like someone had lit a match under the row of chairs. "She's in ICU," the nurse said. "Critical, but stable." 2 words did cartwheels in my chest, and 2 other words put sandbags on them. Critical, stable. I repeated both so my brain wouldn't choose only the one it liked. The hallway to ICU felt like walking upstream. Machines hummed, wheels whispered. Other families kept their voices soft so their pain wouldn't wake anyone up. The room they led us to was small and bright around the edges. Layla lay still, except for the stubborn lift fall under the blanket. Tape crossed her cheek where a sticker should have been. Her braids splayed like commas, pausing the sentence of the night. Ma took her hand and said her name the way you ring a bell. Auntie stood near the window, eyes on whatever sky the city had left between buildings. I stood beside the beeping monitor and matched my breath to the green line's rhythm, like if I could keep time, she'd keep time too. The nurse said we could talk to her because hearing is the last door to lock. So we filled the room with home. I told her dumb stories, how Manny found fixed the wobbly lotto stand because she kept nagging him. How the art teacher said her bridge drawing had movement, and Layla said, yeah, it moves because it's trying to be the real one. How the cat from 2 doors down had beef with our doormat and kept flipping it like it owed him money. Ma told her about plantains and the Sunday dress that still needed hemming for church. Auntie sang 3 lines of Blessed Assurance and forgot the rest and made up a better ending. Dr. Singh, eyes kind but sandpapered by long hours, came in and spoke human instead of TV doctor. Her body is working hard. Swelling is the big thing. We're watching it close. I know you're tired, but talking like you are helps. Let her know where home is. He checked numbers, nodded once, and left like a man walking through weather. Around 2 a.m., Uncle Ray convinced Ma to lie down on the 2-seat bench. She did, finally, the kind of surrender that still has one shoe on. I sat, elbows on knees, and prayed the way people who aren't good at praying do. Messy, repetitive, half whispers that use God's name like a life preserver. Please, please, please. The night stretched thin and then thicker again. The air conditioner coughed. A monitor in the next room did a quick alarm, then thought better of it. I stared at the plastic cup on the counter where a nurse had put Layla's hair beads, like tiny marbles catching the fluorescent light. I wanted to pour them back into her hair one by one, tell each bead a joke until it clicked like laughter. Sometime before dawn, the green line on the screen hiccuped. A nurse stepped in and tightened the sensor. She said, false, calm. That word untied a knot inside me I didn't notice. Outside, the first shade of morning leaned against the window. City birds practiced their rude little operas on the ledge. Someone down the hall chuckled to a text. Life kept leaking in through the seams. Ma woke up with a line from her scarf pressed into her cheek. She stood, kissed her knuckles, and declared, "We going home to shower and come right back. You hear me, little miss? You don't go anywhere." Auntie straightened the blanket like it could fix the world. I touched the rail, metal cool enough to sober a man, and said, "We'll be back before your cartoons start." Downstairs, Detective Harris waited with a paper cup of coffee and a list of camera angles. He said, DOT camera at Linden and Rockaway was down. He was annoyed at the universe. But MTA lens on the bus shelter caught a blur. Matches what you said. We're scrubbing private cams now. Bodegas, laundromats. We'll get a plate, even a partial. I gave him Manny's number without being asked. Manny sees everything. Outside, Brooklyn was already clocked in. Delivery trucks huffing, a man arguing with a pigeon, a jogger in last year's marathon tee dodging puddles like landmines. The sky was a weak blue, the kind that needed coffee. We walked to the bus stop holding silence like a third hand between us. When the B-46 sighed up, the driver took one look and waved us on without a swipe. New York is rough, but it learns your face. We passed Linden, The vigil was a low galaxy, candles stubby, wax rivers cooled white along the curb, a stuffed panda gone gray from dew. The pink balloon tugged at its string as if the morning had something to say. I pressed my forehead to the bus window and let the glass be cold. In the reflection, I looked like a kid trying on a grown man's sorrow. Maybe that's what I was. At the brownstone, the apartment smelled like last night's rain and the vanilla candle we forgot to blow out. I set the broken polish bottle on my dresser like a relic and washed my hands until the sink water ran clear and still felt stained. Ma changed her scarf, put on fresh lipstick that didn't need to prove anything, and said, "We go back in an hour." I nodded. An hour is a lifetime and also a blink.
They say a week can stretch like gum on a hot Brooklyn sidewalk. In the ICU, it stretched farther, thin enough to see right through and still somehow impossible to break. We kept showing up with our wrists stamped by worry, and each day taught us a new way to wait. Morning one began with elevator doors that closed too slow and hopes that opened too fast. Ma read Psalms in a whisper, tough as knuckles. Auntie marked time with a rosary of styrofoam cups, one prayer per sip. I took the chair by the window, where a sliver of sky squeezed between brick and water tower, and I told Layla the news of the block. Manny's cat finally retiring from doormat beef. Miss Giselle winning 50 on a scratch-off. The way the bus driver said morning like it was a tip he could afford. Dr. Singh's team spoke plain, swelling still watching us, pressure trending good, then fussy, then holding. Talk to her, they reminded, which was like telling us to keep the lights on in a storm. So we did. Ma braided stories the way she used to braid hair, summer camp plans, church picnic drama, the mystery of why her rice always tasted better on Sundays. Auntie hummed Blessed Assurance and drifted into made-up verses where mercy rhymed with Jersey, and somehow it worked. On day 2, the detective came back with grainy stills printed on cheap paper, a black blur at the edge of a frame, the hint of a dent, the smear of a plate. He smelled like rain and coffee. He said, "We're canvassing every shop up Linden, down Flatbush, over to church. Somebody's camera saw more. We'll find it." Ma nodded, the kind of nod that keeps your heart from falling out of your chest. I told Layla about graduation rehearsal. The band still cooking the same 8 bars. Dante practicing a bow like he'd won the lottery. Principal Morales pretending not to cry when he looked at that saved front row seat with her sparkly tea. I said, "You heard me, right? The seat's yours. You better show up however you can." Day 3, the room smelled like lemon disinfectant and cafeteria fries. A volunteer brought a coloring set for young visitors and left it on the counter as if Faith might walk in wearing light-up sneakers. I cracked open the box and traced the Brooklyn Bridge on a blank page, gold stars overhead, my hand clumsy but trying. I taped it next to a heart monitor, an extra skyline to chase. That afternoon, a social worker asked if we needed help planning arrangements, and I hated the word like it had sharp edges. Ma stiffened. "We're not arranging nobody," she said. The social worker apologized and backed out, leaving pamphlets like little ghosts. I slid them into a drawer and shut it soft. Night 3 bled into morning 4. The beeps wrote a lullaby that never let you sleep. I learned the shape of every alarm and its favorite joke. When the numbers dipped, my stomach did the same elevator drop. When they rose, I let myself imagine a homecoming parade, made of takeout bags and new hair beads. I promised I'd learn to braid if she wanted, even if I'd be trash at it. She loved to roast my skills. On day 4, the swelling eased a little more. Dr. Singh smiled sideways like he didn't want to jinx it. He said, "She's stubborn," and Ma answered, "Tell me something I don't know." We laughed, surprised by the sound, and it felt like a window opening. I told Layla if she woke up, I'd let her bedazzle my cap, no arguments. Auntie said she'd bake a sheet cake that would make the deacon board cry. We took turns going home to shower. The apartment felt like it was waiting at the window for us, angling its blinds the way a nosy neighbor does. I packed a tote, charger, hoodie, the crayon drawing, a fresh rose wrapped in a damp paper towel. Back at the hospital,
I replaced yesterday's tired flower with the new one. The nurse smiled like we were fixing a tiny corner of the world. Day 5 rained hard. Water needled the glass, and the Q-train smeared by like a silver finger dragging light. A group from church gathered in the waiting area, palms raised, soft harmonies threading through fluorescent buzz. A little boy handed Ma a paper heart he'd cut with blunt scissors. In shaky pencil he'd written, "I will miss you at recess." Ma tucked it in her Bible, a leaf pressed into a book. That night the room cooled, the beeping held steady, a faithful metronome. I told Layla about the time we got stuck on the F train, and she turned the car into a game show, quizzing strangers on cartoon-themed songs until the whole row of tired faces couldn't help but smiling. I said, "That's you. You make bored air remember its music." Her finger twitched, maybe a muscle, maybe a message, maybe my hope getting up on its toes. We slept in shifts and not at all. Somewhere around 2 a.m., the alarm flooded and reset. Nurses slid in, quiet as librarians. The green line bounced, then steadied. I exhaled a prayer I didn't know I was holding and leaned back until the chair squeaked my secrets. Morning 6 broke with that bruised purple light New York gets before it commits to daytime. Dr. Singh's smile was thinner. He said, "We're watching a trend I don't love. Pressure creeping, oxygen needs stacking." He adjusted settings, called for another scan. Hope put its coat back on. We met the scan in the hallway like parents at a bus stop. When it returned, the team read images like sailors read weather. Words turned careful. Options became ifs. She would pray later. For now, we waited, holding breath in each other, very close. By sundown, the crosswalk on Linden had turned into a small, stubborn galaxy. Candles crowded the curb like stars that refused to clock out, and our block, loud, cranky, full of side-eye love, showed up in the only way New York knows, together, even when we don't agree on nothing else. The heat had that early summer weight, sticky enough to slow tempers by half a beat. Buses sighed at the stop, brake air puffing out like tired dragons. Manny dragged a broom across the sidewalk, pushing glass dust into a dull glitter line, muttering, "Ain't right, man, ain't right." He had taped a printer paper sign in the bodega window, "Please drive like someone you love lives here," and under it, a jar labeled, "For Layla's homegoing," with a handful of singles floating like lily pads. I came in slow, hoodie up, though the air begged for sleeves. That cracked bottle of pink nail polish weighed down my pocket like a stubborn memory. The crosswalk pole wore ribbons now, pink and white, knotted by small hands. A poster board with Layla's school picture leaned against the base, her gap-toothed grin catching the last gold light. Somebody had printed "Justice for Layla" and taped it crooked at the top. It made me want to tear the air in half and give her the clean piece. Ma arrived between Aunt T and Pastor Denise, the three of them moving like a single careful animal. Neighbors parted without being asked. "Thank you for coming," Ma said so softly folks leaned in to hear. You could tell the old heads from the young by the way they held their candles, cupped hands like prayer versus vertical, daring the wind to try something. Aunt T spread a folded tablecloth on the low wall by the hydrant and started arranging what people brought. Sunflowers tall as gossip, roses with thorns that snagged the cloth, and little paper hearts cut with blunt scissors, a stuffed panda gone gray from too much hugging. The panda's eye hung by a thread, and a girl in a glitter jacket asked if she could fix it with tape. She liked pandas, she said, and nobody argued. Sax player Jules rolled up with a dented case and breath that smelled like menthol and church peppermints. He took one look at the crowd and went straight into Lean on Me without warming up. Notes floated over the double yellow lines, and for a second, even the buses got quiet to let them land. A couple dudes from the barbershop stood with arms crossed, blinking too fast. A delivery biker killed his engine and bowed his head like he was at a stoplight for the soul. When the light changed, cars crept through the intersection the way you walk through somebody's living room, respectful, eyes down. A rideshare driver rolled down his window and whispered, "God keep y'all," before easing away. A city worker in a neon vest brought a fresh sleeve of tall candles from his truck and passed them out like communion. The smell of wax mixed with exhaust and corner-fried chicken, a New York incense nobody asked for, but everybody knew. Pastor Denise lifted her hands. Family, we're going to pray and then we're going to sing. But before that, if anyone wants to share a memory, the concrete is our pulpit. She looked at me, my throat locked like a jammed turnstile. Instead, a little boy with a Spider-Man tee shuffled forward clutching a paper. "I will miss you at recess," he read, letters big as his courage. His mom wiped his nose, and everybody clapped the soft clap that keeps feelings from spilling out. Miss Giselle, the one who won 50 on a scratch-off, stepped up next. I used to hear her sing into my hallway, like the building was holding a mic. She made Tuesday sound like Saturday, and that's a gift. She pressed a kiss into her palm and laid it on the poster. A teenager in a puffer vest, despite the heat, said Layla once shared her bus seat so an old lady could rest. Manny cleared his throat and told the story of how she had told him, dead serious, that his cat needed anger management for beefing with the doormat. The crowd laughed in a small ripple, grateful for a joke that didn't feel like betrayal. I finally found my voice because silence started to feel like disrespect. I stepped onto the painted white line that made the crosswalk and said, "She was the loudest joy in our apartment, and the quiet after hurts worse than any siren. I'm gonna walk that stage for her, just like she told me. I'm gonna throw my cap like a rocket, and we're gonna find who did this." The last sentence came out lower than I planned, a promise and a threat braided together. Detective Harris watched from the edge, hands in his pockets like a man trying not to crowd grief. When I stepped back, he nodded once. Message received. A couple of dudes near the deli muttered about catching the driver themselves. The older heads hushed them with that look elders got. Firm, no extra words. This was a night for candles, not chaos. Tomorrow could be different. Tonight, the block was one heartbeat. Pastor Denise began to hum "This Little Light of Mine." People joined in, sloppy but strong, the way New Yorkers merge lanes, aggressive kindness. Kids lifted their candles, wax dripping on the knuckles, and nobody flinched. Ma's voice came in late, shaky, then sure. She gripped my elbow hard enough to leave a crescent moon. "Let it shine," she whispered, and I realized she meant more than the song. Rain flirted with the edge of the clouds, then backed off. The sax changed songs, slipping into a slow hymn that made the traffic lights blink in time. A cousin I hadn't seen since Auntie's cookout hugged me so long my ribs took notes. The crossing guard from PS 189 showed up in her bright sash and cried into Ma's scarf like it was a handkerchief mailed straight from heaven. Two girls from Layla's class placed glitter pins on the makeshift altar. "She always borrowed mine," one whispered. A boy put down a half-used sketch pad. On the top page, a stick figure with bead braids stood on a cartoon bridge under a sky of crooked stars. She said she wanted to draw the whole city. He told me, shoulders squared like a grown man wearing his father's jacket. I swallowed a stone and nodded. A camera crew rolled up. Local news. The reporter asked if Ma wanted to speak. She looked at me, then at the crowd, then at the crosswalk. "My daughter's name is Layla," she said finally, voice even. "She loved to dance and boss her big brother and put way too much glitter on everything. If you saw that car, don't be scared. Call it in. Do the right thing." The reporter tried to push a follow-up, but Pastor Denise stepped in between like a bouncer and said, "That's all for tonight." As full dark settled, candles framed the intersection like a runway for prayers. The pink balloon tugged at its string, bumping the pole's metal with a hollow clink, clink, clink. A breeze slid up from the bay carrying salt and summer and a whisper of rain not yet brave. I crouched by the curb to rearrange flowers, making a space in the middle for the white rose I'd bring later. Wax pebbles crunched under my sneaker like tiny bones of light. Aunt T wrapped her shawl around mine and me at the same time like we were one set of shoulders. "We gon' clap for two at graduation," she said into my hair. "You hear me?" I managed a sound that was half laugh, half cough. Across the street, the barber turned his closed sign, but stayed in the doorway, arms crossed over the kingdom of lineups and debates. The last bus rolled by, driver raising 2 fingers off the wheel in that quiet salute the city reserves for grief and snowplows. The choir folks from Bed-Stuy started a final hymn, soft and sweet, and every window nearby turned into stained glass for a minute, reflecting flame. Even the pigeons on the traffic light wire stayed still, like they were listening for a key change. We didn't leave until the candles burned down to button-sized puddles and the sax's breath gave out. I blew out the one nearest the chalk outline kids had drawn, a big heart with Layla in block letters, and smoke curled up like a ribbon pulled through a ring. "Good night, Shorty. We got you." The block exhaled with me, a sound you could mistake for the wind. On the walk home, I kept looking back at the pole in case the balloon decided to follow. It didn't, but the clink, clink, clink chased us down the avenue anyway, a little metronome knocking time into shape. Upstairs, the apartment smelled like wax and takeout and the vanilla candle we'd lit the night before. I set the cracked pink bottle on the shelf beside Layla's photo like a relic and washed my hands until the sink water ran warm and then cool and then honest. Before bed, I taped another copy of the Brooklyn Bridge drawing above my desk, this one with extra stars. I wrote under it, "Hold the light." Then I sat quiet long enough to hear the city's heartbeat, not the sirens, not the trains, but the softer thrum underneath, the one that says, "We're still here, we're still here, we're still here." I believed it for almost a whole minute. Then I slept, candle out, shoes by the door, ready to get up and carry the light again.
The morning of the funeral rose gray and heavy over Brooklyn, clouds sagging low like the city itself was grieving. Even the pigeons on the fire escape moved slower, as if they'd read the program. I woke before the alarm, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant subway growl under Atlantic Avenue and the hiss of buses on wet asphalt. A siren moaned somewhere near King's Highway, long and low, the kind of sound that keeps you from pretending it's just another day. Ma was already up, pressing her black dress in the kitchen, the iron steaming against fabric that smelled faintly of starch and last night's candle smoke. She pinned Layla's last school picture button to her lapel like a badge. Aunt T arrived carrying a thermos of ginger tea and a box of tissues. Her sneakers squeaked on the hallway linoleum, leaving small crescents of rainwater. I dressed in the only suit I owned, navy jacket, black tie borrowed from Uncle Ray. Before buttoning it, I slid the white rose into the inside pocket next to Layla's folded crayon drawing of the Brooklyn Bridge, the paper edges already soft from being handled too much. The rose's stem brushed my chest every time I breathed in, a reminder of why I had to hold my back straight. Outside, the stoop still carried a faint trace of candle wax from last night's vigil. Uncle Ray waited by the curb beside a black town car sent by the church deacon board. Neighbors stood on their porches as we passed. Some made the sign of the cross, some raised 2 fingers in that silent city salute that means, "We see you." The driver kept the radio off. Only the wipers clicked a slow metronome against drizzle. The church on Nostrand Ave smelled of polished wood, lilies, and rain-wet umbrellas. Ushers in white gloves guided us to the front pew, where the child-sized white casket rested beneath a spray of pink roses. Its polished lid gleamed beneath stained glass light, reflecting patches of blue, green, and red on the satin pillow inside. I thought about how Layla loved colors that didn't match and wondered if she'd laugh at the church's accidental rainbow. Neighbors filled the wooden pews. Manny, the bodega cashier, still in his work apron. Dante in a too big borrowed suit jacket. Layla's classmates clutching paper hearts cut out during art period. The hush that settled was the kind that has its own heartbeat. When the choir began humming, "His eye is on the sparrow," even the old floorboards seemed to hold their breath. Ma rose to speak, gripping the lectern edges to steady herself. Her Brooklyn accent wavered but held. Layla loved loud. She laughed loud. She danced even louder. I pray we keep that kind of joy alive in this house. A tear slid down her cheek, caught on her scarf, but her voice stayed strong till the last word. The choir answered her with a soft chord like an amen stitched in harmony. Pastor Denise kept the sermon short, straight-spined, her voice rolling like subway wheels on clean track, about the fragility of life, the need for tougher drunk driving laws, the mercy that still waits for the guilty. The congregation's amens came quiet but heavy, landing like stones in a pond. I stayed seated, clutching the rose in my fist, not trusting my voice if I tried to speak. At the cemetery, the June drizzle returned, misting the green canopy over the open grave. The funeral home men in dark suits lowered the casket slowly, while the choir repeated the hymn's last refrain. Ma reached out a hand as if to slow the descent, and whispered, "Wait, just wait." But gravity didn't wait. The rope slid until the small white box rested in the earth. When it was my turn, I stepped forward, crouched, and laid the white rose on the lid before it disappeared from sight. "Layla, you told me to throw my cap high. I will. You'll see it from up there." The petals caught a single drop of rain that rolled off like a tear too shy to stay. Everyone took a handful of soil to sprinkle in. The damp earth clung to my palm like it wanted to come home with me. Aunt T's shawl flapped in the breeze. Uncle Ray kept a firm hand on Ma's shoulder while she hummed the hymn's closing bar through quiet sobs. I thought about the bridge drawing in my pocket, how its gold stars looked stubborn enough to shine through mud. We returned to the church basement for the repast. Foil pans of baked ziti, fried chicken, collard greens, and a sheet cake that read, "Rest in Heaven, Layla," in pink icing. Her classmates taped their paper hearts to the cinder block wall above the buffet, building a collage of color and goodbye messages. I stood near the juice table, shaking hands I barely remembered meeting, repeating thank you until the words lost shape. Later at the brownstone, Ma placed the folded funeral program inside the family Bible and whispered, "We need faith now more than flowers." I propped the muddy rose stem beside Layla's bridge drawing on my nightstand so the two things that had survived the rain could keep watch together. That night, I sat on the fire escape with the city breeze on my face, watching drizzle bead on passing car roofs under the street lamp. Down below, someone set off a single bottle rocket that sparked, hissed, and died midair. I told myself it was Layla rehearsing for my cap toss, just a little too early. I promised her I'd aim higher. If you're still listening, the next sunrise would bring rehearsal for graduation, cap, gown, and the speech I hadn't finished yet. I had to figure out how to stand tall on that stage carrying her memory. That's chapter 7.
Graduation morning hit different. Sun blazing like the city wanted to show up dressed in gold for us. The air carried that summer on the way smell. Hot asphalt waking up, corner store bagels toasting, a metro bus coughing at the light. I stepped out in my pressed black gown with the tassel dangling like a promise, the white rose pinned near my heart where Layla's cheering should have been. Ma wore her Sunday's best navy dress with Layla's school photo button shining on her collar. Aunt T showed up in a floral blouse and sneakers because she refused to trip in church shoes. Uncle Ray had on his vintage Knicks cap, even though Ma warned him not to. He claimed it was for good luck. The four of us walked to the subway like a small parade no one clapped for yet. On the Q train ride to the school auditorium, I caught our reflection in the window. Me sitting stiff-backed in the gown, Ma clutching a purse like the diploma might jump out, Aunt T humming something gospel sweet under her breath, and Uncle Ray pretending to read the ads overhead. A kid across the aisle pointed at my tassel and whispered to his little sister, "He's graduating today." The sister grinned and gave me a shy thumbs up. That one small gesture felt like a blessing from the whole city. The auditorium smelled like warm varnish and folding chair metal. Sunlight cut through high windows, laying gold stripes across the stage curtain. A crooked banner read, "Congrats, Class of 2025," in hand-painted letters, the exclamation point drooping to one side. Band members tuned up, brass squeaks filling the room like anxious birds. When the procession started, I walked in behind Dante and in front of Janelle, who kept fidgeting with her mortarboard. I scanned the crowd automatically, parents waving phone cameras, kids waving glitter signs, until my eyes found the front row seat draped with Layla's sparkly tee. The sight punched the breath out of me and then put it back in, steadier than before. That seat glowed brighter than any camera flash. Principal Morales opened the ceremony with a joke about the fire alarm never quite working during drills. Laughter loosened the room. The band managed to play the march all the way through without getting lost. I kept my eyes on the program, tracing Layla's name written in my notes at the bottom of the page like an invisible +1. One by one, the names were called. Tassels bobbed, sneakers squeaked on the temporary ramp, cameras flashed like impatient stars. When my turn came, the MC's voice rang clear. Darius Coleman, honors, with special dedication to his late sister, Layla Coleman. The crowd let out a soft collective gasp, then broke into applause. Ma stood, tears slipping down, but her smile aimed steady as a spotlight. I walked across that stage taller than I ever been, heart pounded against the rose pinned to my chest. I shook Principal Morales' hand, gripped the diploma cover, and instead of pausing for the photographer, I raised my cap toward the empty seat and whispered, "This one's for you, Shorty." For a heartbeat, the sunlight hit the rose's petals just right, like a camera flash from heaven. After the diplomas came the speeches. Valedictorian Sasha spoke about resilience. Dante cracked a joke about cafeteria pizza that made the janitor laugh loudest. When my turn came as class representative, I walked up gripping my folded paper, but barely looked at it. To the families who raised us, to the teachers who didn't quit on us, and to my sister Layla, who taught me to celebrate every small win, thank you. Hold your people close. Tomorrow's never promised, but today we stand here together. The audience answered with applause that felt like a hug. As we threw our caps in the air, I made sure mine flew higher than the balcony rail, like Layla dared me to do in the dream. The tassel spun loose and drifted down slow, while everybody shouted names and snapped selfies. I caught my cap before it hit the floor, grinning through wet eyes. Outside the building, we took pictures under the crooked banner. Ma kept dabbing her eyes with tissue, but insisted on one photo of me saluting the rose on my gown. Aunt T made the photographer snap 3 extra, just in case. Uncle Ray kept saying, "We did it, nephew. We really did it." I slipped away for a moment to the football field again. The bleachers were half empty now, except for a janitor picking up programs. I stood at the 50-yard line, holding the diploma up to the sun like a trophy, whispering, "Layla, we crossed together." The breeze moved across the grass in a ripple that felt like her running ahead to the end zone. If you still listening, that evening would bring Detective Harris knocking with new camera footage and questions that might shift the case. That's Chapter 9.
The cap was still drying on the radiator from the rain that caught us after pictures when the knock came. 3 sharp raps that sounded like news instead of company. Evening light slid thin between the blinds, striping the living room wall like caution tape. Ma froze halfway through folding my gown. I opened the door. Detective Harris stood there, trench coat open, rain spots on his shirt sleeves, eyes carrying the weight of a long day. "Mind if I step in?" he asked, voice even but lower than usual. Ma moved aside wordlessly. The TV was on mute, showing a Mets Philite reel. Auntie clicked it off and set her knitting aside. He laid a manila folder on the coffee table. Inside were 3 glossy still shots printed from grainy surveillance. A dark sedan under a Linden Ave street lamp, a partial plate, a smear of bumper sticker, and a reflection that might have been the driver's cap. We traced the path, Linden to Rockaway to church, got a plate fragment and a witness from the bodega who remembers the dent. Ma leaned forward, gripping her scarf. "You found him?" Harris shook his head slowly. "We have a suspect. Queen's address. Cars registered to his cousin. We're getting a warrant to pull DNA from the grill for paint and fiber. He's been ducking us, but the net's closing. The words landed like cautious hope, heavy but solid. Auntie asked the question floating above all our heads. He drunk that night? Harris nodded grimly. Bar receipts say he left around midnight. Witness saw him weaving on Linden. Hit-and-run statute gives us leverage. We just need the last piece. Camera from a pawn shop that caught the collision reflection in its glass door. Techs are enhancing it. I stared at the still shot of the sedan, remembering the way it had fishtailed away into the dark, taillights smoky red like two angry eyes. If you catch him, will there be a trial? Vehicular manslaughter, leaving the scene, judge won't be gentle. Ma whispered a verse, "Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord," but her eyes stayed on the photo. Before he left, he handed me a business card. Call if you remember any detail you forgot that night, even the smallest thing. Sometimes cases break on a memory that shows up late. He tipped his head toward the rose still pinned to my gown by the radiator. She'd be proud you finished the walk today. Then he left, boots thudding softly down the stairs. After the door shut, the apartment seemed to exhale. Ma went to the kitchen to reheat coffee gone cold. Auntie lit Layla's candle again and set it by the window. I stayed at the table, turning the business card over and over until my fingers memorized every raised letter. Later, I slipped out to the stoop with my phone flashlight and the rose from graduation, now a little wilted. The street smelled of wet brick and delivery truck diesel. A neighbor in slippers nodded in passing without asking questions, New York courtesy at its finest. I sat on the top step scrolling through photos from the day. Caps midair, Ma's watery smile, the empty seat with the sparkly tea catching sunlight. Every picture felt like proof that joy had fought for a place in the same frame as grief. I posted one shot quietly with the caption, "For Layla, justice coming." A few friends dropped by after dark carrying takeout containers of empanadas and ginger ale. We ate in the kitchen, swapping stories about Layla, how she once organized a sidewalk dance-off between the pizza guy and the mailman, how she would roast your haircut but braid it better right after. Laughter kept breaking through like sunlight between storm clouds. Around midnight, when the friends left, I found Ma standing by the window looking out at the flicker of the vigil candles still alive at the crosswalk down the block. "They burn in slow but steady," she said. "Like her," I answered. We stood shoulder to shoulder watching the tiny flames battle the breeze. Sleep came light and jumpy. I dreamed of Layla chasing pigeons at the vigil site, laughing with her arms out like wings. The dream ended with her pointing to the sedan photo taped on the fridge and saying, "Don't let him hit nobody else." I woke with that sentence echoing in the dawn quiet. If you're still listening, the next morning would bring a call from the detective, new evidence, and the arrest warrant signed. That's Chapter 10.
The cap was still drying on the radiator from the rain that caught us after pictures when the knock came. 3 sharp raps that sounded like news instead of company. Evening light slid thin between the blinds, striping the living room wall like caution tape. Ma froze halfway through folding my gown. I opened the door. Detective Harris stood there, trench coat open, rain spots on his shirt sleeves, eyes carrying the weight of a long day. "Mind if I step in?" he asked, voice even but lower than usual. Ma moved aside wordlessly. The TV was on mute, showing a Mets highlight reel. Auntie clicked it off and set her knitting aside. He laid a manila folder on the coffee table. Inside were 3 glossy still shots printed from grainy surveillance, a dark sedan under a Linden Ave street lamp, a partial plate, a smear of bumper sticker, and a reflection that might have been the driver's cap. We traced the path, Linden to Rockaway to church, got a plate fragment and a witness from the bodega who remembers the dent. Ma leaned forward, gripping her scarf. "You found him?" Detective Harris shook his head slowly. "We have a suspect. Queen's address, Car's registered to his cousin. We're getting a warrant to pull DNA from the grill for paint and fiber. He's been ducking us, but the net's closing." The words landed like cautious hope, heavy but solid. Auntie asked the question floating above all our heads. "He drunk that night?" Harris nodded grimly. "Bar receipts say left around midnight. Witness saw him weaving on Linden. Hit-and-run statute gives us leverage. We just need the last piece. Camera from a pawn shop that caught the collision reflection in its glass door. Techs are enhancing it." I stared at the still shot of the sedan, remembering the way it had fishtailed away into the dark, tail lights smoky red like two angry eyes. "If you catch him, will there be a trial?" "Vehicular manslaughter, leaving the scene. Judge won't be gentle." Ma whispered a verse, "Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord." But her eyes stayed on the photo. Before he left, Harris handed me a business card. "Call if you remember any detail you forgot that night, even the smallest thing. Sometimes cases break on a memory that shows up late." He tipped his head toward the rose still pinned to my gown by the radiator. "She'd be proud you finished the walk today." Then he left, boots thudding softly down the stairs. After the door shut, the apartment seemed to exhale. Ma went to the kitchen to reheat coffee, gone cold. Auntie lit Layla's candle again and set it by the window. I stayed at the table, turning the business card over and over till my fingers memorized every raised letter. Later I slipped out to the stoop with my phone flashlight and the rose from graduation, now a little wilted. The street smelled of wet brick and delivery truck diesel. A neighbor in slippers nodded in passing without asking questions. New York courtesy at its finest. I sat on the top step scrolling through photos from the day, caps midair, Ma's watery smile, the empty seat with the sparkly tea catching sunlight. Every picture felt like proof that joy had fought for a place in the same frame as grief. I posted one shot quietly with the caption, "For Layla, justice comin'." A few friends dropped by after dark, carrying takeout containers of empanadas and ginger ale. We ate in the kitchen, swapping stories about Layla, how she once organized a sidewalk dance-off between the pizza guy and the mailman, how she'd roast your haircut but braided better right after. Laughter kept breaking through like sunlight between storm clouds. Around midnight, when the friends left, I found Ma standing by the window, looking out at the flicker of the vigil candles still alive at the crosswalk down the block. "They're burning slow but steady," she said. "Like her," I answered. We stood shoulder to shoulder, watching the tiny flames battle the breeze. Sleep came light and jumpy. I dreamed of Layla chasing pigeons at the vigil site, laughing with her arms out like wings. The dream ended with her pointing to the sedan photo taped on the fridge and saying, "Don't let him hit nobody else." I woke with that sentence echoing in the dawn quiet. If you're still listening, the next morning would bring a call from the detective, new evidence, and the arrest warrant signed. That's chapter 10. The night before graduation felt like a countdown with no music. Just the tick of rain on the window ledge and the hum of the fridge in a brownstone kitchen that hadn't laughed out loud in 2 weeks. I ironed my own gown while the city outside kept flexing its noise, promising the world would still be waiting after the ceremony, whether we were ready or not. Ma was at the table folding tomorrow's church bulletin, like her hands needed work to keep from shaking. She'd pinned Layla's photo to the fridge with the magnet that used to hold pizza coupons. Every time the AC rattled, the picture fluttered, as if Layla was waving from the page. Auntie came over in her scrubs, smelling faintly of disinfectant and cocoa butter lotion. She carried a tiny white boutonniere she'd picked up from the bodega cooler. "Matches that rose," she said, sliding it into my lapel. Her eyes shone with that mix of pride and sorrow you only see at graduations, weddings, and funerals. The same shine for different reasons. At the afternoon rehearsal, the school gym smelled of floor wax and popcorn grease from last season's basketball games. Principal Morales barked stage directions over the squeak of sneakers, while the brass band kept stumbling over the same 2 bars. Every time I passed the front row, my eyes caught on the chair draped with Layla's sparkly Big Bro's #1 fan t-shirt. Even empty, it had presence, like it was saving the seat for her laughter. After rehearsal, I slipped out to the football field behind the school. The bleachers creaked under my weight as I sat watching the wind toy with loose candy wrappers. I unfolded my speech draft and read the first line aloud to the empty field. For Layla, who taught me to dance before I could walk across any stage. The breeze flipped the page, as if telling me to keep going. Dante jogged up, still wearing his practice sneakers. "Big day tomorrow, bro. She be front row screaming for you." I smiled without answering. Some words cost too much to spend at practice. Back home, Ma cooked baked chicken and string beans, though nobody was really hungry. We ate under the single bulb above the table, Layla's candle flickering beside the framed photo. The white rose I planned to wear tomorrow stood in a juice glass of water, stem bent but determined. After dinner, I sat at my desk trying to finish the speech. I kept scratching out lines, too short, too stiff, too sad. Until finally I wrote, "Hold your family close. Every small victory counts. Even the dance steps you laugh about later." That line felt like hers, so I let the pen rest. Late that night, I couldn't sleep. I slipped on the gown and stood before the hallway mirror. The fabric smelled faintly of starch and candle wax. I whispered to my reflection, "Tomorrow's for you, Layla. I'll hold it together, promise." The mirror didn't answer, but I swear the hallway felt less empty. In the living room, Ma had dozed off on the sofa, with the TV casting a soft blue glow across her scarf. On the coffee table, a sticky note in Auntie's looping script read, "Proud of you. She's proud too." I slid my folded speech underneath it so I wouldn't forget either message. Sometime after midnight, I sat by the window listening to Brooklyn breathe. An occasional siren, distant train brakes squealing over steel, a couple arguing 3 stoops down, then falling quiet. I traced the skyline with my finger on the glass. Bridge, tower, rooftop water tank. Every point of light felt like someone else's story, still going. I thought about the white rose in the glass on the table, how its petals had curled just a little while waiting. I promised it that it would see the stage too. Grief makes you say things to objects, and sometimes the objects keep the promise better than people do. Close to dawn, I finally slept for an hour. In the dream, Layla was braiding my tassel like a braid bead string, telling me I had to throw the cap higher than the streetlights or it wouldn't count. I woke up smiling through wet eyes, and the smile stayed a heartbeat longer than the dream. If you're still listening, the sun that rose over Flatbush that next morning was brighter than it had any right to be. The gym would fill with parents, the banner would hang a little crooked, and the microphone would squeal just once before settling down. That's chapter 8.